Tonight's meditation, we haven't done this in a little while, I think since before the holidays, is going to be question and answer. This is my favorite meditation class to give because I like to keep my finger on the pulse of the people and see what we're dealing with in everyday life. There's everything that I see in the news and I get from my students, but there's a whole world of other stuff going on out there. So I'd love to hear questions that you guys have. This can be specifically about meditation. This can be what you have experienced in your meditation practice or lack thereof. How do I start meditating? It could be something that doesn't really seem to be related to meditation. So I've already had some great questions about how do I deal with this or that in my personal life? How do I deal with forgiveness? How do I deal with death? The question of the week in the dojo is, why are people afraid of death? And it can be anything like this. It just cannot be, how do you throw a front punch? How do you pivot on a roundhouse kick? So something that is deep and does not have to be the most impressive question that makes you sound like a philosopher, but something that's getting at that aspect of practice. So questions. And if you guys are watching online, you can also text me a question. If you're messaging something that is not a meditation question, I will continue to ignore all of those comments. So commence with questions. You guys that are on Zoom, you can also raise your hand and ask. I know Tanya's got one, so I'm just going to pick her first. Go ahead, Tanya.
Actually, I was wondering about a reading from the Tao Te Ching.
A reading from the Tao Te Ching. You want my opinion or my?
I'd like you to speak to part of it. This is number 50. It says, between birth and death, 3 in 10 are followers of life, 3 in 10 are followers of death. And people just passing from birth to death also number 3 in 10. Why is this? Because they live their lives on the gross level. Those who know how to live walk abroad without fear of rhinoceroses or tigers. They will not be wounded in battle, for in them the rhinoceros finds no place to thrust its horn, nor the tiger to use its claws, and weapons no place to pierce. Why is this? Because they have no place for death to enter. So I thought it was kind of tied into the question of the week, but my question for you is, can you speak to this whole thing, but also in particular to the phrase knowing how to live?
Yes, well, I think that's what the whole thing hinges on for me, at least. So it sounds like there's some math involved in this. I'm not going to deal with that. But the other part of it, read me that exact part where Lao Tzu is saying, those who know how to live, read that part.
Those who know how to live walk abroad without fear of rhinoceroses or tigers.
Those who know how to live walk abroad without fear. And it could be without fear of rhinoceroses and tigers and whatever else, somebody trying to stab you. It's without fear of death. And I think that we could expand that and say that it is likely just without fear in general. Also, if you have no fear of death, really, what is there to fear anymore? Death is that guaranteed thing. Death is a foregone conclusion. We know that it's going to happen. And a lot of us have a tendency to spend a lot of time thinking about death. What's death going to be like? Rolling around in the back of our head about the experience of it, or what is it going to be like after death, and all of that. And this is usually a function of the ego. Now, the non-ego part of us, the big self, the big mind, can of course roll around with the concept of death, and we should feel safe thinking about it. We should feel comfortable with the understanding, the certainty that death will come. And I give a long, involved talk about this several months ago about death. But I'll just touch on the idea that if we treat life like it is permanent, it's the same problem as if we treat anything like it's permanent, because nothing is permanent. This is the nature of the universe. This is the nature of life. Everything is impermanent. And so all things and all people die. So that's not to say that we should just ignore it and pretend that it's not going to happen. It's to say that we should go forth with life, and I mean on a day-to-day basis, knowing that it could be there behind any corner. And I'm not saying that because we should be paranoid about it. I'm saying like we should use it to feel alive and feel present in every moment with the knowledge or the wisdom that it could be our last, not from the fear that I've got to, stop it from happening. This is the way that a lot of people teach and practice martial arts, is that everybody out there in the world is an attacker that's trying to kill you or kidnap you or worse. And you should treat everybody you see on the street like this, because it's the only way to stay safe. Now, you could get something out of that, but mostly what you're going to get out of that is paranoia and a very unsatisfying experience of life. You're just going to be constantly stressed. So this is not how I like to teach or practice. But I do like the kind of warrior's ideal or the samurai concept of being totally prepared for death. Because of course, if you are actually in battle, you could die, but also it prepares us for life, and it helps us to know how to live. So it goes both ways. This quote that Tanya is asking about from the Tao Te Ching is about how does knowing how to live help us basically feel free from death. And it can also go the other way. So a samurai would dress every morning, knowing that if this is the last day that I have on this earth, I meet my end today on the battlefield, or a ninja attacks me as I'm walking down the street and I die, then I'm going to go into the next world or end this life as properly as I can. I am dressed well, I'm clean shaven. Obviously, I'm not prepared for death. Everything is right. And actually, when I read this gave me a whole different perspective on fashion, which I'd like to just ignore completely because I feel like it's a waste of my time. But if you look at it like this is an opportunity to be prepared. When you go out into the world, you got to be ready that this might be the last day that you ever live, which gives every day a sweetness and a sense of urgency that is not stressful, but like really brings you into every moment. This is what we're looking for out of our practice. When you know how to live, that does not mean that you will not die. It means that the fear of death has no power over you. It means that as you move through your life in the world, that you are doing it fully in every moment. And if you are in that kind of space, you are kind of achieving the closest thing that you will be able to achieve to immortality. So you guys didn't know you were going to attend this class tonight and learn how to become immortal, but this is it. When you are able to be in the moment and you dive fully into every breath, every step that you take, and there are lots of different practices that will enable us to do this better, but meditation, Tai Chi, martial arts, these are incredibly powerful practices that will have this effect. We are living every day and every moment to the point where it feels expansive, and our perception is such that life seems longer. We have more memories because we are actually present for them. And looking back on our life, it will seem more full. Looking back on our day, it will seem full. And looking back on each moment, or just being present in each moment. This is what we want. So I don't believe that Lao Tzu was saying that if you know how to live, that you cannot die. I believe, or at least my interpretation is that if we know how to live, we are so present and so in life that we have no fear of death has no power over us, and we are living in such a way so that death itself actually has less power over us because we have lived so much. That's my 2 cents on that quote. Other question. And again, if you guys online want to make any comments that are questions, feel free. If you guys are watching here, you don't have to just make this face like I'm really thinking of the best possible question. It can be anything, and you might not even know how to fully ask your question. Does anybody want to? Okay, good. Beatrice is going to save you from asking another one time. Go ahead. You will have to unmute yourself first.
Okay. Sorry, I'm on my phone and I'm not always on Zoom, so I don't know where the buttons are. Okay. What do you do with like as the years go by, like you just start feeling like more cynical, you know, and you have like this unsettling feelings because like just more things are happening that are bad, or like people in your family members starting to die because you're like in your late 30s and just you start feeling like an adult or something. It's just like awful.
Yeah, I get the world and the feeling of your question for sure. What do you start to do, or how do you deal with those cynical tendencies? You're leaning towards everything's just going to hell right now, and I will say that I am one of the most positive people that you will ever meet in your life. That is not by nature. That is like just from practice, from meditation, from the way that I've decided that I want myself to be. And the last few years, and especially the last year, have really tested that in a way that I would say I cannot truthfully say that I was feeling positive and just like go get him every day of this last year. There have been times where, yes, with things that have happened in my personal life in connection with COVID and other, people's health issues, people dying, have felt a similar way. And there are really 2 ways that I have found. These are 2 general ways that I have found that we can deal with this general feeling and with this cynicism. So one is before it gets in there. So any thoughts, any tape that we kind of replay over and over again in our head, any habitual way of thinking is started with a thought, right? It was something incepted this thought into us, and then it just kept going, and we thought like, well, this is just my view of the world. That's not really what happened. You saw something entered, and then it stayed there, and it built up this strength and this power over you. So the first line of defense against cynicism and that kind of existential dread is to recognize those things, and before they make a home in your head, nip those thoughts, nip them in the bud, and let them go right away. You are not likely going to be able to fully stop these things from entering your consciousness. But for example, if you don't watch the news every day, which is what I was doing at the beginning of the last 4 years and for the beginning of this year, you'll notice that watching the news and being bombarded with all of the bad news is going to put you in a certain kind of mood. And you might need to do something about these things. So I'm not suggesting that you ignore what's going on in the world, but I am going to suggest that there's a balance between knowing what's going on and being informed to the point where you can do something about it, and then just wallowing in it. And so you watch the same news stories over and over and over again, and you're watching this thing that the president did, and then the next thing that the president did, which was basically the same as the first thing that the president did, but just in a new way. All that stuff is gonna drag you down and sap your power and your strength, make you more cynical, make you feel like there's just, what is the point of any of this? So first, watch how much you're taking in. And when it does enter, try to let it go immediately. Maybe it's something you write down and decide, this is something I need to do something about. Okay. And then have time set aside for you to consider those things, to consider the actions, to actually be working on these actions that you want to take. But that can't be something that's just rolling around the back of your head all day long, because that will start to drag you down and impact everything else in a negative way. And those two things are kind of like a combination of the two ways. The first way was don't let as much in, and the second one is when it is in there, be able to let it go. But you can recognize a simple, not easy, but a simple way of dealing with this is recognizing that we have a tendency as human beings to have more negative thoughts, and it's because we focus on negativity. It's a survival mechanism from our evolution. We need to be aware of the things that are dangerous for us out in our environment. So we have a tendency to have more of those negative thoughts and to pay attention more to negative things. But this is less necessary for us in our modern existence, where we're not constantly in threat of dying by being eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. So you can just simply recognize every time you have a negative thought, make yourself have 3 positive thoughts. Okay, I recognize the negative, and then, all right, let me take stock in what's going on in life. Let me choose 3 things to be grateful for, to be thankful for, 3 things to be in awe of, with how amazing the world and the universe and life are. And that conscious effort will start to bring back from the brink of where you've begun to slip into. And this is, on some level, just recognizing reality. Reality is that not everything is so terrible. Reality is that some things are terrible and we need to do something about it. And reality is there are also great things that we need to be aware of and we need to appreciate and celebrate. So work on that. I had a question earlier. Somebody asked me if I'm ever going to write a book. The answer is yes, I will. I'm working on like 5 different book ideas, and that's my own problem. One of them is going to be great someday. I will absolutely write a book, and I don't know what it's going to be about yet, but it's going to be something about martial arts and meditation and philosophy for sure. And I'm much better at talking about these things than I am about writing about them. But if you are interested, check our blog. So go to schoolofma.com, and there's a blog. I write something every month. So I have another question from Howery. Let me see. After I read the book, Zen on the Martial Arts, the book taught me to give gentleness and tolerance to negative people, but if they give negative people more power, what should I do next? Yeah, this is a great question. You will, in the same vein of what I was just talking about with Beatrice's question, if you are being bombarded by negativity from negative people, and this is different from watching the news, these are people that you have in your life, that you want to have in your life, and or people that you just cannot really avoid. It's, you know, the people that are driving with you next to your car and flipping you off, or the people that are in front of you at the gas station line, or these are all involving cars, I guess. I hate driving in LA apparently. But these things that are happening to you that you cannot really just say, forget it, I'm not dealing with this at all. It's in your life and it's there. You want to choose to deal with these things in as positive a way as possible. And these people might take that kindness, or take that good attitude that you're giving them, and instead of taking on that positivity themselves, they then think, well, then the way that I'm acting is all right, and I'm just going to keep doing it this way. And some people will actually continue to try to step on you. Now, I say try to step on you because you are the person who is actually in charge of and has the power over whether you are being stepped all over or not. This is partly about perception, partly about the way that you're acting in response to it. But there's absolutely going to be a time, or many times, where you're dealing with somebody's negativity in a positive way. You are trying to help them, or you're just letting it wash right over you in a way that it doesn't touch you. But that might embolden that person. That might make them feel like, okay, the way that I'm acting is okay. Now, look, I'm very clear on this. Our job is not first and foremost to go out into the world and be superheroes and fix everybody else, because we got to fix ourselves first. We got to be as great and solid with ourselves as we possibly can be. And then when we are solid, then we can go out and be the change that we want to see in the world, be that solid example that everybody else sees. And this is, I believe, the best way to handle a situation of a chronically negative person, is to be as positive and be as great of a positive influence and example as you can for those people. And it's not always going to work. Some people's negativity is so overpowering and so just there, and they're stuck in it, that no matter how positive you are, they're just going to be that way. Now, if you let it take you over and you let it start to impact you in a negative way, then that is, let's be very clear, that is on you. Now, your environment is stronger than will. So you might need to decide, like, this is somebody that I can't spend as much time with, or this is a situation that I have to take myself out of. And there are times when you're going to need to do that, absolutely. But there are also going to be times where you realize that this person needs to, for their benefit, get kind of verbally smacked down a little bit. And there is a very strong, very necessary, very clear difference that you need to draw and recognize between, I'm offended, and so I'm going to put the smack down on this person. There's a difference between that and, I'm unfazed by this, but I can tell that what this person really needs is a wake-up call. They need to know how what they are saying or the way that they are being is landing for other people, and how it is affecting, their surroundings. And if you can get yourself into a place where you are fully, from a egoless perspective, from a very strong, centered place, where you are then providing this person some needed feedback that is sometimes strong and very forthright and forthcoming and brutally honest sometimes. If that's coming from the right place, not a place of ego, but from your larger self, from your true self, and maybe you need to take, this kind of negativity that somebody's given you, take a break from them, meditate, practice, get to a great place where you're connected to your higher self, and then say, okay, as my higher self, what is the best way that I can help this person? Maybe it is to tell them what they need to hear. If it's coming from that, then it's going to, it's going to have a much better effect, and B, it is going to mean that it has not affected you, right? So you might have an idea from the ego that says, I'm going to give this person a piece of my mind, and it's for their own good, I swear. But even if that can't just be an idea that pops into your head, that this is for them, it's got to fully be where it is coming from. Then it's not going to take any control over you, and it will land for that person in a much better way, because they can tell if it is from ego and it's from your small self fighting back, if it's from a resistance on your part, and they can tell if it is something that is from a very loving, peaceful, centered place. And you can be outwardly angry, yet still be inwardly peaceful. And that's a fun thing to practice, so try it. Okay, Miro, you had a question, right?
I did, but then I forgot it. But I do have a follow-up question to what
Great, go ahead.
you're saying. So when you meditate and you center yourself and then you do speak to the person that needs to hear it, a wake-up call, how do you then navigate your relationship after that? Because in my experience, I've always felt really awkward around them after I assert myself.
Yeah, this is a wonderful question. So if you guys didn't hear that, it's let's say that I'm in that situation and somebody needs to get a talking to. I give them that talking to, but then what happens after that? So I feel awkward in that relationship. They feel awkward towards me. Okay, so first of all, if you feel awkward after that interaction, or something feels wrong, something feels like you're stuck in that interaction, that is because that was not a fully like untethered kind of interaction. You weren't fully there with your big self, with your true self, your high self. It was coming from the ego, or you left something unsaid, which usually comes from the ego being involved, right? You start this great thing and then you're like, oh, but I'm kind of scared of where this is going. And so the ego creeps in there and it says, this is what the ego does. The ego is like, I'll get all huffy and puffy. I got to do something about this. I'm going to say this thing. But then as soon as I can get out of it, I'm going to get out of it. Like if you're like me and you have a tendency to not really be confrontational, right? Your ego says, as soon as I get even a whiff of the kind of response that I'm looking for, let me get out of this conversation, out of this confrontation as quickly as possible. And that's when you have left something there on the table, which is why it is lastingly feeling, sticky or gross, or like you are stuck there still, you're attached to that interaction. Could also be that your ego doesn't have a tendency to try to get out of it. Your ego has a tendency to try to just pound these people down, and either they leave feeling bad about that or you leave feeling bad about that. So whatever it is, first and foremost, if it's coming from the ego, you probably aren't going to feel great about it after. Now, my first advice for that is obviously you should really fully enter into that conversation from a place that is without ego. But that's not always going to be possible, and you will not always succeed. In fact, I'll say usually in the beginning, you will not succeed. So what do? Go back in and clear it up. And we should, look, you can do whatever you want to do. I don't like telling people what they should or should not do, but I'll say if you want to be happy, my strong suggestion is, and if you want to be efficient and effective in life, walking around with all this mental baggage that you have with all of these people in your world because of the interactions that were not completed, that is going to really slow you down, weigh you down, and make you feel awkward and just add a lot of weight and heaviness to life that you don't need and you don't want. So get right back in there. When should you do this? Immediately. If it's somebody that you can see, great. You probably can't see most people right now because of COVID. Okay, call them immediately. This is not something to be cleared up via text. But see, I'm so much better when I text people. It gives me time to think about what I need to say, and I craft the perfect message and the perfect response and all of that. Texts and emails are so easily misunderstood. It doesn't have the same impact. So call this person, see them best on Zoom, some kind of FaceTime, something, get in there so that there are no miscommunications here, and clear it up immediately. Hey, I said that, I said that I had a problem with your sister. I'm making something up here. I don't have these problems in my life because I just clear them up right away. I'm imagining something like that. I have a problem. I said I had a problem with your sister, and I was complaining about this thing that she said. She called me this, and I said that. And really, and this is where you got to come clean with it, Meryl, and all the rest of you who are listening to me and pretending that this is not you, but it's you. You got to come clean with it and recognize first for yourself, and then lay it right out there for the other person where this actually came from. The thing that you said that you didn't mean to say, or the thing that you left unsaid that you should have said was the ego. And it was more specific than that. You know, the thing that I said, I was complaining about what your sister said, was because, you know, I was afraid of losing our friendship. And because I care about you so much that I was really afraid that this was going to happen. And this is what most tense, like emotional conversations with people comes from, is you care about that relationship. You want that person in your life. You really care about them. And so we get all worked up in those situations. If you didn't care, you wouldn't care. You'd just be like, okay, see you later. I don't need this in my life. But if it's somebody who we really care about, it is important to us. And those are the things that we have a tendency to kind of screw up because we make it all about us. So you recognize that. I made this all about me. I was afraid. I was worried that this was going to happen. And so I'm sorry that I said that. Really what I meant was this. And it doesn't have anything to do with your sister. Your sister's fine. The problem is the way that I handle it in that situation. And look, if you come into that, so you screwed up the first time, but the second time you got it, great. They will leave that conversation and you will leave that conversation feeling great. Everything is cleared up. There is no awkwardness to be had. You know that something is left unsaid or something needs to be cleared up because you feel awkward at the end. And there is no time like the present to get back into it and clear it up. And not a single day, not a single moment should pass where we are holding on to that stuff. And I've talked about this in the past too. There might be things that happen. You're listening to me right now and realizing like there are several things, interactions, things that I said, whatever from the past that I should really go back and clear up right now. And then there are some people that I can't do that with. They're out of my life, or they've passed. They're dead. How do I do that? So this can be something that you, again, as I said before, it's got to start with you clearing it up for yourself. So get really to the root of it. Know for yourself what bothers you so much about it. Recognize how that is from the ego, how that is from your small self, and then be able to let that go. And it does not actually have to be something that you clear up with the other person. Now, some of you are hearing me say that and thinking to yourself, okay, I don't have to have all those difficult conversations. No, if it's something that you're still carrying around, that is a conversation for you to have. That is something for you to clear up, and you should not shy away from it. You should enter it with excitement and passion, because you are going to feel so much lighter, and that relationship is going to be so much better after you deal with it. But if it's something that, if it is someone that you cannot clear things up with because of you know, they're gone or whatever it is, it's there. Maybe there's some people who are, it's actually not safe or healthy to have any kind of contact with them. Okay, so you clear it up for yourself, but be totally real. Be totally present to what is actually happening on the deepest level. What is it about this that bothers you about you? Because that is really what's going on here. It never has anything to do with the other person. It is always something that you see in that person that bothers you about yourself. And that's when the ego gets involved. You know that you're good, you know that you're solid if the ego is not getting involved. And you are just being able to act totally from a place of solidness. It feels right, and you feel so steady. There's no part of this that you're afraid of. There's no part of this that you are kind of going back and forth. You're wishy-washy in your mind. You know for a certainty. That is something, that is a state of being that many people never get to in their entire life, at least with most things in life in most situations. So this is part of what our practice is for, right? We become grounded physically and mentally and emotionally with our meditation, with our practice. And sometimes that is what you need to do, is to step away from a situation and ground yourself in your body, in your breath, in your emotional state, and then go back and deal with it and be totally real with yourself and with that other person. And our practice should afford us this ability and this opportunity. So when we meditate tonight, don't sit there and think about all of the things that you need to clear up with all the people in your life. Maybe write a little note, set it down next to you, and then sit and connect to that place, to that higher self, and practice that connection so that it is there later on for you when you need to be in that state with those conversations with those people, right? And then later on, set aside some time, write down a list of people that you need to connect with, and spend some actual time doing this. And then when you have one of those conversations and you clear it up, and then you are feeling lighter, really let yourself experience that. Really celebrate that for yourself, because you want to reinforce that and you want to keep doing that. And you want to keep doing that as quickly and as cleanly as possible. So sit comfortably.